The War No One Wanted. War of the Submarine, Book 2, by R.G. Roberts. Narrated by A.J. Shuck. Prologue. Thornback. 16 April 2038. The Mid-Indian Ocean. Attack submarines spent much of their career spying. USS Thornback, SSN 855, was better at it than most. But Lieutenant Commander Tony Platts missed talking to the outside world. A short and stocky woman who played lacrosse at the academy, she missed clean air, friends, and sports. As if to spite her love of the outdoors, Thornback had spent the last 2 months parked off the coast of Réunion, a tiny French island hosting a suspicious increase in ship and submarine activity. All of 970 square miles, and with a population of under 1 million, Réunion didn't exist on the U.S. Navy's strategic map until 3 massive underwater stations cropped up in her vicinity. Then, naval intelligence picked up rumors of a secret French submarine base located there. 69 days of watching, however, failed to reveal a proverbial smoking gun. Finally released from her watchdog duties, Thornback steamed east for 30 hours before heading up to periscope depth and streaming her communications wire. As the submarine's executive officer, or second in command, Tony managed the boat's daily schedule. She also dealt with administrative minutiae, which meant everything was her problem. "I was thinking about a swim call." Commander Dwayne Elliott, Thornback's CO, leaned against the navigation table in the sub's control room, one ankle crossed in front of the other. He was tall, too tall for submarines, leggy, and one of the best-looking blondes Tony'd ever met. "We've been cooped up too long." Tony grinned. "You mean you want to air out that peculiar smell of bacon and Vaseline?" Every sub had a scent. Thornback, although a brand spanking new Zero class on her first deployment, was already pungent. Someone, Tony never ferreted out who, packed away a case of Vaseline right next to a hot water heater in the chief's berthing. Within a week, the smell permeated the hull, and Thornback became known as the Vaconator. "Perish the thought," Elliot laughed. "I've grown fond of it." Tony snorted. "Pull the other one, Captain." Before she could say more, the radio watchstander approached, message tablet in hand and wide-eyed. "XO? Something wrong, Wang?" Tony asked. "Flash traffic," Wang gulped. Tony grabbed the tablet, pulling up the first flash message. 2? The Navy hadn't sent multiple flash messages since September 11, 2001, 37 years earlier. Tony was born in 2001, so she'd never even seen a real flash message, just fake ones for drills. This one made her heart try to hammer out of her throat. Flash was the highest precedence for naval messages, meant to be used for enemy contact or national emergencies. Her eyes swept over the message. Enterprise Strike Group encountered Kilo-class submarine in Strait of Malacca. Kilo assumed hostile and sunk. Indian naval forces attacked without warning. Enterprise CSG engaged by 2 Indian carriers and escorts. USS Kidd and USS John Finn sunk. USS Bella Wood has Enterprise in tow. "Holy shit," she whispered. No nation dared fire on American warships since Vietnam. Engaging a carrier was suicide. 2 destroyers sunk. Tony's stomach churned and acid bubbled in her mouth. She swallowed it down. The XO couldn't look weak, not even when faced with news like this. She'd known the world was creeping closer to war, everyone had, but they'd expected war with China, only to have the Pacific behemoth explode into a 4-way civil war after the communists threatened Taiwan one too many times. Enterprise had been on her way there, Tony remembered. How had they managed to sink an Indian submarine instead of engaging Chinese forces? What kind of ever-loving cluster happened in the Strait of Malacca? Shaking herself, Tony opened the update to that message, and immediately wished she hadn't. Enterprise sunk. Kidd and John Finn with her. Bellawood and Fletcher survived, just a single cruiser and destroyer, but they'd been pounded and were out of missiles. 2 Indian frigates were reported sunk, but both of their carriers were combat effective. Now the Indian strike group patrolled the Strait of Malacca, closing it to American ships, while Fletcher and Bellawood limped away. It was the Navy's worst defeat since World War II. Nausea churned in Tony's stomach, and she tasted acid as she almost threw up. How many were dead? How many were people she knew? And how in the world would the politicians explain this to the public? Enterprise alone had a crew of over 2,000. Were they all dead? She rubbed her eyes with a shaking hand. This was unbelievable. What kind of idiot shot at the wrong nation's submarine? And what kind of trigger-happy moron on the Indian side started a battle instead of looking for a diplomatic solution? Sure, tensions were high. Thornback wasn't rolling around out here by accident. Everyone wanted territory out in the Indian Ocean, with underwater stations popping up on every corner, ridge, and valley. Resources were plentiful, and no one really policed who got what. But shooting? Tony's eyes flicked back to the tablet, dread coiling in her chest. There was another, newer message, one from just 3 hours earlier. Hands trembling, Tony clicked to open it. Flash, flash, flash. To all units, from CINC, OPREP 3 Pinnacle. 1. Units of Indian Navy sank 2 U.S.-flagged merchant vessels without warning. Survivors recovered by HMAS Hunter. 2. French forces captured Armistice Station, Independent International Underwater Settlement, sinking USNS Amelia Earhart TAKE 6 and expelling all American, British, Australian, and Canadian nationals. 3. Congress passed declaration of war at 1600 Zulu, 15 April 2038. 4. India and France declared war on United States at 1800 Zulu, 15 April 2038. 5. All French and Indian naval assets to be considered hostile. Tony felt like her voice came from 1,000 years away. The Indians attacked the Enterprise CSG, and Congress declared war. What? Commander Elliott's head snapped up. They declared war, she repeated. First time since World War II. We couldn't even make it 100 years, could we? Fuck me, Elliott whispered. Everyone in the attack center, or con, stared. Elliott's eyes were wide and lost, and if her captain was lost, where was she? Could this be a prank? It couldn't be real. Tensions were high in the Indian Ocean. The French liked to flex their muscles, and the Indians bossed everyone around like they were the queens of Sheba. But no one wanted war. This was World War I all over again, with treaties crisscrossing the world, separating countries into alliances. At least it's just India and France, Elliott said. The odds won't be in our favor, but we're better trained. Beats fighting with China. As long as they stay in that civil war they started, Tony grimaced. China invading Taiwan had been coming for years, and that was the war the U.S. Navy trained for. Except that fight had somehow become a 4- or 5-way civil war that no one else wanted a part of. But now they were supposed to fight India and France? How had that happened? In hindsight, Tony might remember that the pot had started boiling the moment humanity began exploiting underwater resources. The Indian Ocean was rich in oil, gold, manganese, copper, nickel, and other resources. Everyone wanted a piece of the pie. Most countries didn't want to share. At least the U.S. finally got on the naval buildup bus, albeit years later than their now enemies. Thornback was the result of America's efforts, commissioned just last year, and the last of the Zero-class nuclear attack submarines. Her newer sisters were improved Zeros. Both classes were the successors of the Virginia-class submarines, designed in the early 2000s and built over the next 2 decades. Like the Virginias, they were multi-mission attack submarines, able to spy, fight, and deploy special forces without reconfiguring. Thornback was 389 feet of sleek, fighting power, with 4 torpedo tubes, a vertical launch system for 12 missiles, and a crew of a bit over 130. Her weapons room could store up to 28 torpedoes or harpoon missiles, 3 more than the Virginia's. Thankfully, the sensitive nature of their mission meant 10 of those torpedoes were war shots. We need to find somewhere to arm up. Tony bit her lip. We need real torpedoes. A lot of them. We need orders, too, Elliot swallowed. Tony did some quick mental math. It's 7 a.m. at home now. You think anyone's awake to send orders, or do we go deep and maintain stealth until we get to Diego Garcia? Diego Garcia was what the Navy called the British Indian Ocean Territory. The U.S. partially leased it from the Brits, and it was the closest place that might have weapons for them. Close being 2 days away. Let's head. Con sonar, new submerged contact bearing 004. Chief Hale's voice blared out from the intercom to Tony's right. Got it on the lateral array and the dome. Recommend coming left to determine range. Sonar, con, any idea on classification? Elliot asked. Con sonar negative. This puppy's super quiet. Holding him is touch and go. Stand by, Elliot replied, staring at the intercom like it might bite him. Tony blinked as her captain turned to look at her. Shouldn't they turn? She cleared her throat. Coming left would head us in the right direction for Diego Garcia. And close the distance on this contact. Elliot fidgeted. There's not supposed to be any other American subs in this area. You think it could be an enemy? A cold chill tore down her spine. They were at war. The rules were different, weren't they? Why the hell hadn't anyone sent them updated orders? All French and Indian naval assets to be considered hostile. Those words were as useful as a hole in the head. Were they allowed to shoot? What if the contact was some neutral third party? Elliot gulped, his face pale. I don't know. What do you want to do, Captain? She asked gently. Decisions were his job. Executing them was hers. But he just stared. Stared like he didn't know where he was or what to do. Oh no. Was she watching her friend and captain fall apart? Elliot stuttered wordlessly. Tony took a deep breath. Let's come around to identify this new contact. We'll stay slow until we're sure. Either way, he probably hasn't hurt us, so we're safe. Everyone knew American submarines were the quietest in the world. They had plenty of time to make decisions. Go ahead, Elliot whispered. Tony resisted the urge to shake him, instead passing the order to the officer of the deck. Once that was done, she stepped up to whisper to Elliot. You should probably get on the 1MC and tell the crew we're at war. Huge green eyes met hers. Was Elliot sweating? Right. He nodded once, twice, 4 times. Right, I'll do that. We'll be fine, Captain. She forced a smile for him, but her heart pounded madly. 2 days to Diego Garcia. It was the lone British-American base in these waters. Could she manage him for that long? Or would he snap out of it? Elliot nodded again, then again. Finally, he stumbled over to the brackets holding the 1MC, or General Announcing System, microphone. Elliot picked it up with the enthusiasm of a man announcing his own funeral. Con sonar, high-speed screws! Chief Hale could be heard without the intercom. Torpedo in the water, bearing 353! Elliot froze. Captain? Tony asked. He didn't move. She poked him in the arm. Captain! Con sonar torpedo is homing. Estimated range 4,000 yards. Speed 50 knots. Captain, do something! Seconds ticked by. The torpedo raced forward at 50 knots. From that close, the torpedo needed less than 2.5 minutes to reach them. Elliot still stood in the middle of the compartment, pale, wide-eyed, and with his mouth hanging open. Tony ordered, "Ahead flank, hard right rudder!" "Ahead flank, aye!" The sailor at the helm seemed to be waiting for the order. "My rudder is right hard, no new course given." Thornback rolled into the right turn, heading away from the incoming torpedo. She picked up speed slowly, the deck vibrating gently under Tony's feet. The sub's top speed was 52 knots if they didn't strain the reactor. She could outrun the torpedo if she could pick up speed fast enough. Ignoring her frozen captain, Tony leaned into the intercom. "Maneuvering, Con, I need everything you have, and I need it now," she said. "Con maneuvering, what the hell is going on up there?" the engineering officer of the watch asked. Tony gaped. They hadn't gone to battle stations. No one knew. Why wasn't Elliot doing anything? "We've got a torpedo on our tail," she snapped into the intercom, then turned to the chief of the watch. "Sound battle stations." "Aye, ma'am." The donging of Thornback's general alarm filled the cramped space. Tony ignored it and looked at the navigation plot. A bright red icon represented the torpedo on their tail, and it looked close. "Sonar, Con, range to torpedo?" she asked. 1,000 yards, still closing." Chief Hale's voice was high. Too high. "Computer identifies it as a French F-21 Artemis torpedo." "Very well." Her throat was tight. The torpedo was almost directly on their heels. Thornback passed 20 knots. A 30-knot speed difference bought them almost a minute. Could Thornback speed up fast enough? The engineers would have to take the reactor to full power and shift the reactor coolant pumps to fast speed. By the book, that took several minutes. Nuclear engineers were not trained to cut corners. Nuclear engineers were trained to follow the checklist every time. Tony knew that because she was one of them, and nothing in training prepared her for this. How the hell had they let a French submarine get so close? The French weren't supposed to be this quiet. "We need to contact someone." Elliot stumbled a step toward Tony. "Let them know what happened." "Radio, is the comms wire still out?" Tony asked. "Negative, XO. Snapped off when we turned and sped up." "Very well," Tony swallowed. What would they say, anyway? "Con sonar, impact in 30 seconds." "Pass the word to brace for impact," Elliot ordered. He was finally in the game. Too little, too late. The chief of the watch made the announcement anyway. They were trained to, just like they were trained to escape a sinking submarine. Instructors never mentioned the escape methods probably wouldn't work. Everyone knew that. 15 seconds! Tony moved left and braced against a bulkhead for balance, flexing her knees. "Lock your knees and break your legs," the training group always said. Elliot met her eyes. "I'm sorry, Tony." She swallowed. "Me too. 5 seconds!" The F-21 Artemis high-powered PBX B-2211 warhead exploded just aft of Thornback, shredding the submarine's propulsor, ripping her rudder off, destroying both aft sonar arrays, and bending her stern planes. The shockwave pitched the boat forward as the explosion breached Thornback's high-80 steel hull. It punched into her ballast and trim tanks, continuing into her engine compartment. Water flooded in on the heels of the shockwave, bubbling through the engine room and into the maneuvering room, drowning any watchstander the explosion left alive. The transverse bulkhead between maneuvering and the reactor compartment crumbled, allowing the sea to meet Thornback's 150-megawatt S-10G reactor. The reactor went into auto shutdown immediately, but its energy wasn't needed to destroy the submarine. The torpedo's shockwave was enough. Welds burst and metal bent. The last thing Tony Platts saw was water rushing into the control room while people screamed. USS Thornback's Submiss subsunk buoy activated at 23:09 Greenwich Mean Time, just over 7 hours after the United States declared war. Before noon the next day, Russia declared war on the United States in solidarity with their allies. That evening, the United Kingdom, Australia, Japan, and Canada declared war on the belligerents. Within days, a free-for-all brewed in the Indian Ocean. France, Russia, and India gobbled up the choicest underwater territory, snatching independently owned stations or those belonging to their enemies. Caught flat-footed, the U.S. struggled to respond, deploying forces half-armed and half-trained. Thornback's killer, the French attack submarine Barracuda, claimed 3 more victims in the first week. Another 2 American nuclear subs, and 1 Australian diesel submarine. Within a month, the war had a name: World War III.